greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities.
The El Paso Las Cruces community.
Hey guys, welcome to Let's Get Alert. Today we are going to be talking about a book from Denis Pragar. It's called Denis Pragar, Still the Best Hope. This book was written in 2012, I believe, out of context. So I think this is a good book to read. It kind of reminds me of, so a lot of things he talks about is still true today and may always be true. But it kind of talks about what the climate was, like the political climate, like 10 years ago. It kind of brought me back to the days where, like 2011, where I would just shoot hoops outside my house, and then my dad would be listening to Rush Limbaugh, rest in peace, and Mark Levin. It kind of brought me back to those days. A lot simpler times for me back then. Well, anyway, there's three major things that Denis Pragar talks about in this book. He talks about radical leftism and why it's a threat to American society, radical Islam and why it's a threat to American values and society, and then he talks about why American values are important, not just for America, but for the world. So I'm actually going to just go in reverse, kind of. I'm going to start why American values are important for the world, and then I'm going to work backwards. So Denis Pragar says that the three core American values is life, it is life, liberty, and pursuit. I'll get to that in a second. But the first one is in God we trust, liberty, and e pluribus unum, what means from many one. So I'm going to start with in God we trust. So the United States was founded by Christian individualists. The founding fathers kind of agreed that the United States needed to be founded on a moral Christian, Judeo-Christian ethic, and that is why in God we trust. But Denis Pragar kind of says that in God and liberty work together to preserve American liberty and ideals, because the state doesn't grant us liberty, God grants us liberty. And also from In God We Trust, we get life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness was all human rights that God gives us that the state cannot take away. The state cannot take away our liberty. The state cannot take away our right to pursue happiness, and it cannot take away our life, right? But God, those are inalienable rights that God gives us that the state cannot take away. And that also stems from In God We Trust. He also talks about, these are all things that other countries could have too. It's kind of funny, he mentions that the environment doesn't care about the environment. People care about the environment. It's kind of true, but anyway, I'll get on. But he also talks about liberty, and that liberty is core in the United States. For the United States to work, we have to have liberty. And he says nobody else embodies liberty like the United States. I'm a needy person. I need liberty, or else I can't function. I don't like other people telling me what I can and cannot do. I think everybody should be that way. He also says what liberty means. So liberty means political freedom, religious freedom, freedom from the state, freedom from state-imposed religion, right? So you have the freedom to worship whatever you want, and that's very crucial. And then freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, economic freedom, freedom of the press, and freedom from the state. Those are all encompass liberty, and liberty is crucially important and should be a American value. It is American value, but it should not be taken away. Liberty needs small government to function, because with small government, the person is bigger, and when the person is bigger, then there's more output from society, because if the government's too big, then the citizen is too small, and therefore it just decreases liberty, because then the person means nothing at that point. And then he talks about e pluribus unum. E pluribus unum is from many one. I'm actually going to quote somebody off of page 372, I believe. All right, so from e pluribus unum means from many one. That's what it's Latin for. And then I'm just going to read a quote from Mikhail Saakashvili, was, I guess, George, the country of Georgia's former president in 2012, said, "The other day, I was in a small company, and there were Asians, Koreans, Middle Easterners, and some other people. And they had been in America for like 2, 3, 4 years. They talk American, they look American, body language is American. I'm sure they already think American. Go to Korea and become Korean in 1 or 2 years' time. Good luck with that." That's so special about this country, and he's referring to the United States. So it's kind of like anybody could come from any part of the world, any kind of background, and then they could come to the United States and they could become American. So from many one, it kind of strips you away from the tribalism that a lot of other countries have, or that familiarism that other countries have, and then you could be American. Like, of course, you could have liberty your own way, right? So you could have your own customs and such, but you will be incorporated into American society and you will be seen as American. That is very fundamentally an American ideal. Denis Pragar says that all countries could adopt these traits, e pluribus unum, and God we trust, and liberty, to benefit their country. I'm going to read a page 388 in the book that explains this. So this is Denis Pragar giving an example that any country could adopt these values to benefit itself. He uses Honduras for an example. "No country has to become America, let alone Christian, in order to do so. On the contrary, according to the American value system, a country must keep its special identity. Let us imagine Honduras, a poor country in Central America. There is nothing basic to Honduran society that would prevent it from adopting these three American values, e pluribus unum, liberty, and God we trust," is what he's referring to. "Indeed, with a comment to liberty, that is a free economy, and that all other freedoms are not enumerated here, there is every reason to believe that Honduras would begin to prosper. Of course, with the freedom, Hondurans, just like Americans, would also have to embrace in God we trust, meaning that God, not government, is the source of liberty, and each individual is morally accountable to God. And Hondurans would have to commit to e pluribus unum, meaning that blood and family-based cronyism would be abandoned, and all citizens that would take on one primary identity, Honduran, and that each individual's ability, not family ties, would determine Honduran's ability to succeed or fail. With the adoption of American values, nothing specifically Honduran would have to be given up, nor its culture, its music, its religion, its language, its flag. On the contrary, given the nationalist aspect of American values, the Hondurans felt, the better their chances of success, providing, of course, the other values were not affirmed. Now Honduras provides a particularly easy example because it is already a Western country and its religious base is Christian. But what about non-Western, non-Christian countries? Could American values work there? Absolutely. No Muslim country would have to give up Islam. They would have to give up Islamicism, the desire for a Sharia-based government, but not Islam. The individual Muslim would feel free in a state to lead as Sharia observed in a life as he wished. Would freedom mean that some Muslims would opt out of a religious life? Probably so, just as millions of Jews and Christians have chosen to do. But this is usually the fault of the respective religions. If a religion needs a ghetto or a state coercion in order to keep its followers, it is not respect-worthy religion. Religions need to sell themselves in free societies, not rely on absent of freedoms. Nor would any Asian society have to give up its national religious or cultural traditions. Look at South Korea, which has only begun to adopt American values without calling them by that name. The tragedy is that the greatest value system ever devised can be expected in the world be exporters no longer manufacture it. If Americans stop believing in the American Trinity, the future of humanity is dim indeed. No other system exists to promote liberty, let alone all the other values discussed here. One might say that the United States of America has a cure for moral cancer. This book has been about that cure, a pain-filled world awaits. So that's just kind of wrapping up the 3 core American values. Was actually 6, because remember, in God we trust leads to 3 other values, what is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So basically 6, but the 3 core ones. And now I'm actually going to go forth and talk about the 2 things that are a threat to those that Denis Pragar talks about. So the first one would be radical liberalism. So it's kind of funny because he talks that, these leftists in their extreme radical liberal ideas is kind of like a religion, which I agree. And he says that they proselytize, which is absolutely true. They do proselytize, and they do think that their radical leftist ideas is very much that of a religion. I kind of laughed when he said that because it's absolutely true. He talks about how the left value system, it's for egalitarianism, but egalitarianism isn't an American value, nor should it be, because it restricts liberty in a sense. Right? It restricts the freedom of the individual. So he also talks about that the left has smear campaigns that they like, for instance, he talks about big tobacco, like the whole secondhand smoking kills was a major leftist campaign. And I'm young, so I don't really remember that. But then I kind of thought about it, and he's right, because the left, they wanted the legalization of marijuana, right? But marijuana smokers, they all smoke in their house. They don't care about secondhand smoke. As a matter of fact, secondhand smoke is encouraged because it's supposed to get you higher. So that doesn't really make sense. So if the left really was against secondhand smoke, then they would encourage marijuana smokers to also not promote secondhand smoke as well. So I could see where that is hypocrisy of the left. He says that the left wants to keep on opening up America's wounds. Like, they keep on wanting to talk about slavery, and they keep on wanting to talk about all these things. It's like, well, America isn't a perfect society, but we want to become more perfect, and opening up these wounds and saying it's still a problem. Stop it. We all know racism is not okay. We're getting better as a nation, but if you keep on putting us down for our past, then that's not necessarily helping us get better. He also talks about that the radical left, they don't prive, but they really want victimization. They want you to be a victim, and they strive to create more crusades to create more victims, because they feed on that whole victim mentality that is not good, right? He also talks about for instance, Denis Pragar talks about when he, in 1969, before I talk about the story, so we all know that if you go all the way to the left, that's communism, but if you go all the way to the right, that is fascism. So he kind of talks about that. He went to fascist Spain in Soviet Russia in 1969, but he talked about that when he went to fascist Spain, there was far more freedom, even though it was authoritarian and the government was all in control. Under fascism, he was more freer than when he was in Soviet Russia, was all the way to the left. So what the left wants to do is they want to take all your freedoms away. He's not promoting fascism. He's against fascism. I'm against fascism because it takes all the power away from the individual, and fascists are for big government. I don't like big government. I hate it, right? So does Denis Pragar. That's why small government is very important, and the bigger the individual, the better the society. But even with those two polar extremes, life was better, arguably, in fascist Spain rather than Soviet Russia. And then next he talks about Islamist, radical Islam. This is something I kind of wanted to bring up. This really brought me back. And do you remember in 2010 when the Muslim Brotherhood wanted to build a mosque on the World Trade Center tower before it was a monument? Because I do. And that's something that radical Islamists have done throughout history. As I've also looked into this in India, where in India, if the Muslims tore down a Hindu temple, they would replace it with a mosque. It's a stance of kind of like Muslim imperialism. So if the Muslim Brotherhood were to build a mosque on the World Trade Center towers where they used to stand, that would be a mark of Muslim imperialism. All right, so he kind of talks about that. Before, I should have mentioned this before I start talking about this. Don't judge religions based on their values, but judge practitioners of those religions. But the unfortunate part with radical Islam is that he shares a percentage that 7% of Muslims are radical Muslims, and he estimated that number to be 80%, or no, not 80%, 80 million Muslims in the world are radicals, right? So they are not for anybody else other than the spreading of their religion in a very harmful way, right? They will kill so that their religion stays on top. That's very unfortunate. Denis Pragar thinks that the Muslim religion could reform, but I've also watched a report by Imam Tawhidi saying that the Muslims are not going to reform. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but he says that radical Islam is a threat to the American way of life. And it's not that you should hate Muslims, because the United States has helped Muslims try to be a better country, but it's just kind of like that radical Islamists is a threat to American core values, but not just a threat to American core values, they're a threat to other Muslims as well. So it's kind of working to stop that, right? I hope you like this book review. I really hope you get this book. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and take care. Ciao.